While I was burying my husband, his mother and grown daughter changed the locks on our lake house. When I came home in my funeral dress, they were drinking my wine. A realtor was photographing my kitchen, and Walter was scratching behind the glass. For 18 years, that key had turned with one small lift of my wrist. That afternoon, it stopped halfway. I tried again, my black heels sinking into the damp soil beside the porch. The new brass lock still had a bright hardware store sticker along one edge. Inside, Walter pressed his gray muzzle to the glass. My husband's 13-year-old Labrador was breathing too fast. His seizure medicine was in my purse. "Walter," I whispered. His tail struck the floor once. Then I saw the rest. Our wedding photograph had been removed from the mantel and placed face down in a cardboard box. A woman with a real estate camera stood beside the island, photographing the cabinets I had refinished with my own hands. Margaret, my mother-in-law, lifted a glass of wine left over from the funeral reception. Lauren, my 34-year-old stepdaughter, stood near the hall leading to Daniel's study. Margaret opened the door 3 inches, leaving the security chain tasened. "You have 30 minutes to collect your clothes," she said. "I need to give Walter his medication. He belongs to the Mercer family." "So do I." Margaret's mouth tightened. "You were Daniel's wife, Diane. That did not make you his blood." Behind her, Lauren pushed an empty suitcase onto the porch with the toe of her shoe. I looked at the girl I had driven to college, sat beside through 2 breakups, and taught to make her father's favorite apple pie. She would not meet my eyes. Margaret held a photocopied document against the glass. "Daniel signed this before you isolated him from us. The lake house goes to Lauren." The realtor lowered her camera. 2 relatives who had followed us from the cemetery stood near the driveway, watching. Margaret raised her voice for them. "Diane convinced a sick man to change his affairs. Now she wants to steal his daughter's inheritance." The lie was clean, simple, cruel enough to spread before I could answer it. I almost struck the door when Walter's hind leg trembled. Then I noticed the realtor's phone pointed toward me. Margaret wanted a grieving widow screaming on camera. She wanted proof that I was unstable. So I lowered my hand. "Give me the dog," I said. "Then nobody touches another box, document, or drawer. This is not your home anymore." Lauren shifted near the study. Over her shoulder, a small red light glowed above Daniel's wall, said, "The camera?" Daniel had installed it after jewelry disappeared during a family Christmas 3 years earlier. Margaret had complained that cameras made family feel like criminals. Now the light was still on. I lifted my phone. "Don't touch another thing," I said. "The cameras are still recording." Lauren's face changed first. Margaret laughed too quickly. "Those cameras belonged to my son." A motion alert appeared on my screen. At 1:42, I had been standing beside Daniel's grave. The preview showed Lauren kneeling in front of the open safe. My griot went cold and steady. I called Rebecca Shaw, the attorney who had handled our property papers. "They opened the study safe," I said. "I'm coming," she replied. "Do not argue with them. Save every alert." I photographed the new lock, the boxers, the realtor folder, and Walter trembling behind the glass. 10 minutes later, Rebecca's car pulled in behind a sheriff's deputy. Margaret stepped onto the porch. "This is a private estate matter," she announced. The deputy looked at the changed lock, then at the boxes of my photographs. Rebecca carried a sealed legal folder, but said nothing yet. Inside, Lauren backed away from the study. Something thick and cream-colored was clutched in her hand. The deputy looked past Margaret and reached for his radio. "Ma'am," he said, "step away from the syphon, put down the envelope." Part 2. Lauren set the envelope on the hall table. "It was my father's," she said. "I have a right to it." Margaret moved between the deputy and the study. "This woman is using law enforcement to frighten a grieving family." Behind the glass, Walter's legs began to shake. "Open the door," I said. "He needs his medication now." Margaret folded her arms. "You do not give orders in Lauren's house?" That was when Rebecca opened her folder. She handed the deputy a certified recorded deed. This property was held with survivorship rights. When Daniel Mercer died, ownership passed to Diane, not to his mother, not to his daughter. Margaret's wineglass stopped halfway to her mouth. She shoved the old will forward. "My son signed this." "A will does not override this deed," Rebecca said. "And that copy was revoked years ago." The deputy removed the chain and let me inside. I did not go to the safe. I dropped to my knees beside Walter, pressed his pill into a piece of cheese, and held him until the trembling eased. His heavy head settled against my black dress. The room had gone quiet. Even the realtor looked ashamed. Margaret recovered first. Daniel was sick, she snapped. Diane manipulated him. Rebecca turned the deed so everyone could see the date. He signed it 11 years before his final illness. I met with him privately. Diane was not in the room. For the first time, Lauren looked at her grandmother instead of me. The deputy asked Margaret and Lauren to step outside while he documented the changed locks, disturbed state, and missing property. Then Rebecca opened the camera app. The footage showed Margaret ordering Lauren to find. The original, it showed Lauren opening the safe and removing the cream envelope. Rebecca froze the image. Across the front, in Daniel's handwriting, were 2 words, Lauren Mercer. Lauren went pale. "That," Rebecca said quietly, "is the one thing your father never wanted Margaret to find first." Part 3. Lauren stared at the frozen image of the envelope in her hand. What did he put in there? Margaret stepped forward. "Nothing that concerns Diane." Rebecca did not look at her. She restarted the footage. The camera showed Margaret and Lauren entering the house less than 20 minutes after the funeral procession left the church. Margaret used Daniel's emergency key, then called a locksmith and said Lauren was an authorized owner. The realtor's face tightened. "You told me Mrs. Mercer had agreed to move out." On the screen, Lauren began removing photographs from the mantel. She paused over the picture of Daniel and me standing on the dock. Margaret took it from her and placed it face down in the box. "Stop feeling guilty," she said in the recording. "Your father would want his home back in the family." Then they entered the study. "Find the new papers," Margaret ordered. "The originals have to be somewhere." Lauren opened the safe and removed the cream envelope. A few seconds later, Margaret said something that made Lauren reach for Rebecca's tablet. "If we can list by Monday, I can clear the bank before the notice becomes public." Lauren stopped the video. "What bank?" For the first time that afternoon, Margaret looked frightened. "That has nothing to do with Diane." The realtor slowly closed her folder. "You said the sale was for Lauren. Then why are you talking about your bank?" Margaret demanded that Rebecca stop playing the recording. Rebecca did not. The next clip showed Margaret pacing beside the safe. "I only need enough from the proceeds to protect the family. Once the debt is handled, the rest will be yours." Lauren's face went white. "You told me Dad left me nothing because of her." "He would have, if Diane hadn't interfered." Rebecca picked up the cream envelope. "Then we should stop guessing about what Daniel wanted." Lauren's hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a letter in Daniel's handwriting, a financial statement, and instructions for accessing a recorded meeting. She unfolded the statement and stared at the balance. Just over $200,000. The account named her as the sole beneficiary. "No," she whispered. Rebecca turned on the recording. Daniel appeared on the screen wearing the blue shirt. I had bought him for our 17th anniversary. He looked thin, but his eyes were clear. "Lauren," he began, "if you are watching this, Lam Ganond, there is something your grandmother never wanted you to understand." Part 4. Daniel's recorded voice filled the kitchen. "I have provided for you through the investment account that began with the sale of the house your mother and I owned before our divorce. That money is yours. Diane never asked for it." Lauren covered her mouth as Daniel continued. "The lake house belongs with Diane because she built its life with me. She put her retirement savings into the roof, the plumbing, and the kitchen. She kept it going when I could not." My throat tightened. She cared for me here without once asking what she would receive when I died, Daniel said. The house is not a prize between my wife and my daughter. I protected both of you in different ways. Margaret took one step backward. Then Daniel looked directly into the camera. Lauren, your grandmother has always believed blood should outrank marriage. Do not let her turn your grief into cruelty. Nobody moved. Diane is not a guest in my life, he said. She is the person who stayed. The recording ended. Margaret's voice came out sharp. He was confused. Rebecca closed the tablet. This was recorded during a competency review with 2 independent witnesses. The deputy looked from the open safe to the changed locks. The realtor still held Margaret's messages on her phone. Our relatives stood silently near the doorway, hearing the truth in the same kitchen where Margaret had called me a thief. Lauren looked at me with tears running down her face. I thought you kept him from me. I asked you to call before visiting. Your father sometimes slept 16 hours a day. Protecting his strength was not the same as keeping you away. Grandma said you changed everything. She showed you one old paper and gave you a reason not to ask questions. Margaret snapped. I was protecting this family. No, Lauren said. You were protecting your debt. Margaret's face hardened. You would have lost everything because of her. I already had an inheritance. You knew I did. Margaret said nothing. That silence answered more than any confession could have. Lauren turned back to me. Diane, I didn't know about the account. I didn't know why she wanted the house sold. No. But you knew about the locksmith. You knew Walter needed his medicine. You opened your father's safe and packed my photographs while I was standing at his grave. I was lied to. Yes, I said. And then you chose what to do with the lie. The deputy asked Margaret and Lauren to step outside while he documented the damaged safe. The replaced locks and every item moved from the house. As Margaret crossed the threshold, she looked back as though she still expected me to rescue her from the consequences. Did not. But what happened? After that afternoon decided whether Lauren would remain part of my life or become another person. Who had mistaken my kindness for permission? Part 5. The deputy issued Margaret a formal trespass warning that afternoon. He documented the damaged safe, the changed locks, and the false statements made to the locksmith and realtor. Rebecca helped me file a civil claim for the repairs and missing property. The realtor provided her messages, and the locksmith provided the work order showing that Margaret had falsely presented Lauren as a co-owner. Margaret's financial trouble became public anyway. She had guaranteed a failed business loan for a relative and was facing a demand from the bank. The lake house had never been hers to sell, but she had already decided where the money would go. I did not pay her debt. Lauren returned everything from the safe and gave a written statement about Margaret's plan. She also paid half the cost of replacing the damaged safe and both locks. That did not earn instant forgiveness. For 3 months, I did not allow her inside the house. She wrote twice. The first letter explained too much. The second did not blame Margaret for everything. I believed what made me feel abandoned, Lauren wrote, because it was easier than asking whether I had abandoned him too. That was the first honest thing she gave me. Eventually, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop in town. There was no tearful embrace and no promise that everything would return to normal. We talked about Daniel. We talked about Walter. We talked about the difference between being deceived and choosing to participate. Lauren apologized without asking me to make her feel better. When she asked if she could visit the dock one day, I said, "Not yet." She nodded. Respecting that answer was the beginning of whatever relationship we might have later. A week after the funeral, I hired another locksmith. He held out 2 new keys, both for you. I looked through the glass at Walter sleeping beside Daniel's chair. "Yes," I said, "both for me." I returned our wedding photograph to the mantel, but I did not put every room back exactly as it had been. Grief had already changed the house. Pretending otherwise would not honor Daniel. That evening, I carried his letter down to the lake. Walter settled at my feet, his silver muzzle resting on my shoe. The water was still, and the porch light glowed behind us. Margaret had called me a guest in my husband's life. But guests do not rebuild the roof, hold the shaking hands, guard the medicine, carry the memories, and stay when everyone else has gone. I closed my fingers around the new key. For the first time since the funeral, the house behind me did not feel like something I had won. It felt like home.